writers, I am so excited today to be here with Dr. Commander Mary Kelly. She's the author of 11 books, and she's here to talk to us about her wisdom and her experience in the book world and how those books really helped to launch her business. So welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be with you and your audience today.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your business and you and what it is that you do.
So thanks for asking. I spent 25 years on active duty in the Navy. And when I left the Navy, I knew I wanted to do training, speaking, keynoting, be involved in conferences, events. I love emceeing. I love facilitating, all of that. But I'd also, while I was in the Navy, I had written 4 books that were used by the Navy as well as other institutions for leadership. So I had a little bit of experience, but they frankly made it really easy for me because they published it for me. So remember, I don't get any rights on that. All I had to do was write. And so for all of your writers out there, the writing is the easy part. It's everything else that's hard. It's actually publishing, it's the content editing, the text editing, the layout, all of that process part, that's the hard part. So I was deliriously naive after having 4 books because I hadn't had to do any of the real work.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about that for sure, because I think there are probably a lot of people out there, they think all they have to do is write a book and then they're done, right? And that is not the reality of the situation. So talk a little bit about how you learned that hard lesson.
So when I got my first real book that was really mine, and that was the Master Your World book, the blue one, the Master Your World 10 slightly dog-inspired leadership lessons to improve productivity, profit, and communication. This is Abby. She's trying to help me on the phone call right now, on the Zoom call. The idea was I wanted to make leadership accessible to people who might otherwise feel like leadership is daunting. And leadership, when you talk about military leadership, people think about Eisenhower and Patton and MacArthur and, Halsey and Nimitz and all these really big daunting people. But to me, leadership is something we all practice on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to make it accessible. And I knew the slant I had, see the other dogs behind me, my life is dogs. I wanted to make leadership accessible and a little bit fun. And most major publishing houses were not looking for that at the time. And even the people who published me before, they didn't want to do that. So I embarked on this on my own. And this was in 2008 or 9, I think. And that was a long time ago. And the publishing world has changed a lot. So the manuscript was written, but then it had to be organized. I did a couple things smart. I did a lot of things stupid, but I did a few things smart. And that was, I found a really good content editor. I'm fond of saying that I can draft, I can write, I can edit, and I can polish. But if I do all 4 of those, it's not a good product. I can do 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, 3 out of 4 is okay, but 4 out of 4 is not a good product. I need another set of eyes. And even now with all the articles I write, I never, ever, ever let anything leave without another set of eyes going through that. Because frankly, it's hard for us to cut what we've written. My other mastermind group calls it killing your babies. It's hard to think about that because you're emotionally attached to it. And I tried not to be emotionally attached to the writing, but the reality is we as authors put so much of our heart and soul into writing that we're a little attached to it, and we need somebody else to go, that doesn't work. That makes sense only in your head and not in anybody else's. So the idea in terms of getting a great product to me is a very collaborative process. And while I was pretty naive about things like cover design and a few other things, I went to workshops. I spent probably $10,000 just learning how to do the process of my first book. I didn't even know what an ISBN was. I really didn't know. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know that for a book, you need not just one ISBN for the book, but then you need to follow on the manual and the DVD and the CDs and all the other things that go after it, as well as what happens when you update that book? And do you own the rights? And if you don't own the rights, how do you get those rights back? All of these things I researched, and I went to conferences and seminars and bought books. And it cost me about $10,000 just trying to figure out the process. I didn't even know there were people out there who could help you get a book published. I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, well, and I'm sorry that you made the mistakes, but you're making some really valid points for the people who are listening and watching right now, which is, well, let's start with a content editor, right? I mean, that's what I do. That's my job. And you're talking about why that's so important. And I think so many writers will overlook that and think, they can just kind of record it on their phone and, well, they have a book. And, it seems what you're saying is validating where we come from in our work with authors, that no, that's just the beginning. You need there are more steps in that process. So talk a little bit about what that looks like for you. What is your writing process? You're sitting down and what happens?
Oh, I desperately want to get into that. But I also want to address one quick thing. The publishing industry has made it so easy now for people to write books that there's a lot of really terrible writing out there. And this is one of the things that I caution people all the time. I'm like, you know what, just because you can take all of your blog, hey, sorry, there's a dog trying to eat something. Just because you can take your blog articles and throw them together in a manuscript and publish them on a Kindle doesn't mean you should. It's kind of like getting pregnant. Just because you can get pregnant doesn't mean you should right now. You may want to think about it a little bit. And the problem then is, if you've got a book out there and that's got your name on it and it's bad, guess what? You can't undo that. It's out there, especially as a Kindle. And I have read other so-called experts' Kindle books, and they're terrible. They're nuts. There's typos, there's grammar problems, and people said, well, it's just me out there being raw. And I'm like, you know what? If that's how you're presenting yourself to the world, I don't find it professional, and I won't hire you. Mm-hmm. So to me, your book is your reputation. Your book is your brand. Your book is an extension of who you are. And I go through, I'm a grammar crazed person, and I love the Warner's Guide to Rules of Commas and things like that. And I'm a little bit crazy about typos. And I remember I can tell you the page numbers of people I really respected, and there were such egregious grammatical things. I can tell you on page 32, this was a problem. I threw the book down and completely discounted them. Now, I realize I actually read other people's books. Not everybody does. Mm-hmm. However, if you're going to have that out there, it needs to be the best reflection of you as possible. A bad book is worse than no book at all, in my opinion. A great book is the best thing you can have. So for me, I'll tell you my writing process. My writing process is a lot like I went through graduate school, and that is hair piled on top of head, not in a very nice way, a lot of coffee, and I subscribe to Stephen Pressfield's idea that somebody once asked him, when does the muse, how do you feel like writing? When does the muse arrive? And he told me in an interview, he said, the muse arrives every morning at 9:00 when I put my butt in the chair. Mm-hmm. And, his idea is it's the discipline of the writing that makes a writer. And I agree with him 1,000 times. My dad once said, how do you crank out all this stuff? I said, Dad, the formula is really simple. Butt in chair, start writing. And he says, well, what if you don't have anything to say? I said, then I ask people what their questions are, what their problems are, and then I write the solutions. I have to share with you, the content part there's never a shortage of that. There's so much. I wish I could write 12, 14, 16 hours a day, because the content is never the problem for me. It's finding those times, carving out those times in a schedule. And you know what my schedule is like. It is not predictable in any way of the routine of sitting down to write every day, because my days are not routine. There's not one day where I can count on 9:00 every morning. So I have to carve that time out and say, okay, this is when you write. This is due. So you asked about my writing process. I impose when I've got two new books in the process. I've got 4 manuscripts just sitting, waiting for you to take over and fix them. But I've got 2 manuscripts. And the idea is I draft out the outline of the book. I know it's going to change a little bit. And then I attack each chapter. And I have kind of a formula for every chapter because I write nonfiction. So my formula for one book is I present a case study, and then I depict the problem, and I outline the problem, and then I outline other case studies that provide solutions, and then I summarize the solutions. So it's very factually based, but it's got to be interesting enough or people won't care. And what I do is I say, okay, this chapter is due on this date. So if I've kind of dragged my feet or haven't been able to write, or, let's face it, sometimes you're just not in the mood. Okay, news for your writers, they're never going to be in the mood. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you have to be in the mood to write, or you say, well, I'll do that when I feel like it, there's never going to be feeling like it. It's kind of like vacuuming. You're never going to feel like vacuuming. You just sit down and write. You say, all right, I've got this deadline, time to write. And that's kind of my process in a nutshell. I've also found it helpful if I'm trying to throw ideas out there that I'm not sure they're going to stick in the book. I will write a series of blog articles with the intent that that will be part of a chapter. But again, a blog is a very different thing than a cohesive book. So I know that, yes, I can string 10 blog articles on the same topic together, but that does not a chapter make. Yes. Does that help? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be helpful for the people who are listening to hear your really good tips about getting into a writing discipline, getting into a writing habit. That's a question that I get a whole lot. And also about the muse. I get asked that question about the muse, and it's so true. I forget who said, you'll never have to rewrite the writing you wrote at 3:00 in the morning. And that's true. Sometimes inspiration strikes and like magic happens, but all the rest of the time we're sitting down and we're doing work. So those are really good tips for the people who are listening. And I especially love what you said about quality writing, especially when it comes to a business book, especially when it comes to an entrepreneur book. Because you're completely singing our song on that one. That's really our unique offering out there in the world. We're not about getting you a book in 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever people do out there. We're about getting you a quality book that matches your branding, that allows you to have a solid platform to stand on to say, this is who I am, this is what I offer, and my product, me, I am a quality product, because that is so important.
Well, you're right. And even for the fiction authors, I'm a crazy reader, like a lot of your authors. I read a book a week, and if I get a bad fiction book, I mark it in my Kindle, and I will never buy another fiction book from that person again. I mean, we're done. It's like dating. You had a bad date, we're done. Mm-hmm. So that's it. So even your fiction writers, they need to understand that for those of us who buy books, and there's not that many people out there who actually buy books anymore, but for those of us who buy books, you have one shot to get it right. It's that first impression.
Absolutely.
And it starts with everything. It starts with the book cover. It starts with how attractive the title is. And that people think, oh, I can just slap on a title and that's going to make it work. Your title is something, I just want to speak to that for a second. Your title is something you live with. It's kind of like naming your child. Mm-hmm. You live with that name. And so I just heard of somebody who named their child unfortunate illegal drug names. I'm like, really? That sets the kid up for failure. Yeah. A woman named her child crystal meth. Really? I know, right? I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't even, it's like titling a book. The book is going to be there forever. War and Peace way outlived the author. I mean, think about that. Your book could outlive you. Do you really want that title to be something that you're not proud of? So even just coming down to crafting the title takes hours and hours and days and days and days and focus groups and people, and your cover has to be appealing to your audience, not to you. And that's another point is you're writing this book. Many people write a book because they say, well, I have something to say. Well, there's a difference between having something to say and having something to sell. Mm-hmm. And I would make that into a bumper sticker. It's a very big difference, because if you're trying to sell something to an audience, whether it's just the book or it's the book and you and your speaking and your profession and your marketing and everything else that goes with you, then that means that's got to be an extension of what it is you sell, not just something you say. This is where people say, well, I just want to write my story. Well, that's fantastic. And I'm excited that you want to write your story. However, if your story is not different and compelling and interesting to other people, it is not going to be something you can sell. Now, if you're content to just have a book and you want to make 100 copies and give it to your friends and say, get to know me better, that's fantastic. But that's probably not the core of your business.
Yeah, you're raising an interesting point for me here, because part of what I'm hearing is, there are a lot of moving parts in this thing called a book. And a lot of times, people who come to me, they think, oh, it's very easy. I just, talk into my phone and I've got a book. But it's not. You're talking about title. You're talking about quality content. You're talking about a quality cover. You're talking about the layout. I mean, and that you, and most people don't have this gumption, and I know that you do, but, you took the initiative to learn all of these skills. Most people don't have the time or the willingness or the desire to learn to do these things on their own. So as you're talking about all these pieces, I'm thinking, gosh, a program that helps you to do all of these things and to do all of these things well is a huge value proposition.
It's huge. And frankly, after having done it myself several times, here's the issue. I can either spend my time out making money in my business, or I can spend money trying to find the right text editor or the right content editor or the right layout. Or honest to God, I don't care about font. I don't. But I know it's critically important for readership, but I don't know the difference between a sans serif and a whatever else it is. And I know that in the business world, you're supposed to have certain ones. I don't know what those are. So frankly, having been through it, I don't want to do it anymore. It cost me a ton of time and resources. And my time, that's money to me. My time is my money. And so people say, well, you can do it yourself. But again, it's one of those things, but are you willing to put in the time, the effort, and the resources by yourself, which is going to cost you in many cases more than it would if they went with a professional organization that does this. Like, oh yeah, you. So there's a certain value proposition. There's what is your time worth? What is the opportunity cost for you to do it yourself? And the opportunity cost, of course, remember I'm an economist, the opportunity cost is, what is the highest best use of your time? And what does it cost you? For example, for the hour that you spend researching text editors and the 15 hours you spend then interviewing them, that's 15 hours or 16 hours that you could have spent writing, that you could have spent making money. So is it really worth it? You have to really look at this hard. But the other part on this is the idea of many people, I can't even tell you the percentage. I could if I really thought about it hard. But I have to tell you, there's so many people out there who say, oh yeah, I'm writing a book. I'm like, really? Have you finished it? No, but I'm writing a book. I've got one inside me. I go, that's great. So how are you doing on the book? Well, I started on the first chapter. Okay. How long have you been working on this? 17 years. Okay. Okay. So it tells me that there's a bit of not just a motivation problem, but just an accountability issue, that people need someone else to say, okay, how's it going? I need 3 chapters. I need 3 paragraphs. I need this. I need that. And people need someone else to guide them. The book writing process is harder than people think. It's harder and easier. No, it's just harder. I'd love to say it was easier, but it's just hard. And I'm a writer, and I say it's hard. And it's hard because if you do it right, it's tough. Again, it's like leadership. If you do it well, it's hard. If you do it badly, then sure, anybody can show up to work and just wander around and call themselves a leader. Anybody can throw words on a page and call themselves an author. But is that really what you want? So I love the idea of quality writing. I love other eyes on the project. I love other people guiding people along. I love all of that. And I will tell you, when there's time that people say, oh, that's dead time to me. That makes me insane. Dead time means writing time. People freak out when they say, oh gosh, I'm on a plane and I can't get Wi-Fi. I have to tell you, that is my best writing ever. Because I put on headphones, there's no music. I'm just sitting there being quiet. I can't do anything else. I'm not interested in any airline movies. Sorry, guys. I sit there with my little baby laptop and I always have a running list of article ideas, book ideas, chapter ideas. and they're open folders on the computer, and I sit there for 2 or 3 hours on a plane. You can't do anything anyway, and I just write. There's no distractions. And it's funny because I've met a couple other people, including my co-author on my last book, Peter Stark. That was the Why Leaders Fail book. And he does the same thing. I'm like, how you doing? He goes, yeah, I got to get on a plane this week. I got some writing to do. And we laugh about it because it's true. We love long plane rides because we get writing done. Isn't that crazy?
No, I love it. That's a great writing tip, especially, putting on those headphones, like that's the signal to people, like, do not disturb, I'm busy. I think that that's a really good thing to do. So we've been talking a lot about the production of a book and what it takes to make a book happen, to create a book. Let's talk about the other end. Once the book is done and out there, what does it do for your business? What's your experience? You've got 11 books. Certainly those have done a lot of work for you. What's the end result of having that book?
Well, there's probably 4 things that having a book really helps for my business. First, and I've said it and it's kind of true, if you've got one of my books, that to me is just an extension of my business card. And it's harder to lose than a business card. Mm-hmm. So you take the book, you put it on your shelf, and you see my name, Why Leaders Fail, Mary Kelly, Master Your World, Mary Kelly, 15 Ways to Grow Your Business, Mary Kelly. I don't even care if you read it. The fact that it's on your shelf, when you need help, when you need that executive coaching, which is part of my business model, all I want you to do is look at that book and say, I should call her. That's it. So it's an extension of my business card. It's a business card that is hard to lose. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, I like to think that there's pretty good stuff in each one of them. I do feel as though the books are helpful to other people. And I was at the National Association of Landscaping Professionals. And there's this team of guys there named Bill and Ed, and they call themselves the Harvesters. And they knew I was going to be there. They brought the books and they had highlighted, circled. Nobody has marked up those books like these guys have. And I looked through these books. I was like, wow, not only did you read it, we go over it, like every single morning we talk about a point in the book. So the idea is that it would actually help people would be point number 2. Point number 3 is when I do programs, it's a great way to keep the momentum of my speaking. So people say, gosh, ideally when I show up, people want, I want more Mary. Yay, you can have more Mary, have a book. And that's the idea. And then they go home and they can continue the conversation and the momentum. Most of the time we go to a program, we might remember 10 or 20 or 15% of it or whatever it is. But if you've got the book, then you can review some of the principles and ideally keep that going. And then the 4th thing is it does provide revenue. It's a revenue option. And I don't sell books because I want the revenue. I sell books because I want them to have the book. However, it does provide a revenue source for me. For many people, it doesn't. But for me, I'm very fortunate and it has provided a revenue source. So people can sponsor the books. Like if you're a big company and there's a conference, you want to sponsor the book for a conference, I will even make the stickers for that company and I will put them in that, in the beginning of that book, book sponsored by Date with a Muse. And I will put the date of the event and whatever on the inside of the book. They can, in some cases, I've had some companies white label the 15 Ways book. They want their people to grow their business. So I will even redo my cover for them and say compliments of this company to help you grow your business. 15 Ways to Grow Your Business by Mary Kelly. And so it's my book, but I will even put a different cover on it. I will reprint the book and these are just some fun marketing ideas. So let's say you are a big company and you want everybody in your company to have, 1,000 copies of the Why Leaders Fail. Well, I will do a reprint of that book and I will make the first page a letter from the CEO to the company. Dear team, there's 5 things in here that really touch me. There's 5 things I want you to consider, whatever they want. I will do a reprint for that book just for that organization. And again, publishing is so great right now that we can be so flexible to do things like that. Of course, those also mean other ISBNs. But yeah, so those are probably the 4 things that I use the book for in moving my business model forward. My business is I'm an author. I'm a leadership economist who speaks and writes. And that's my business model. So I speak at conferences. If they want a motivational leadership talk, I can do that. If they want an economic brief, I can do that. If they want to marry economics with leadership and figure out the best way forward to make recommendations, I can do that. And the books, I guess number 5 would be, the books give me great credibility in that regard. So people say, okay, why are you an expert? Well, I have a PhD in economics. I have a couple other grad degrees. I spent 25 years in the Navy. I run military bases. Oh, but I have a book. Oh, you have a book?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it does give you that credibility and that authority. That's why we call our retreat Be the Expert Who Wrote the Book on It, because it really, that's the difference that a book makes for people over and over and over again. But a well-written book that's consistent with your branding and who you are.
It has to be good. It has to be good. As an extension of my business, occasionally we'll send out a newsletter and there'll be a typo, and it makes me cringe. You can send out 100 great articles, and if there's a typo, and nobody comments, but if you have a typo, 100 people will comment, So readers do read, and readers do know grammar. Grammar's important, let's eat, grandma. Grammar's important.
Exactly. And the other point that you brought up, Mary, that I think is really important that entrepreneur authors frequently overlook is the fact that a book is a conversation. And it's not just a conversation between the author and the reader. It's also a conversation between a business owner and a potential client. And so starting to have that conversation around, what the client's problem is and what the entrepreneur's solution is a really important conversation that so many authors overlook. And the way that we have our authors construct their books, they're not only having a content conversation, but they're also starting to have that client conversation around, here are some ways that I can help you. So I'm sure that this has happened to you, Mary, because I know that you're a very good writer. That somebody has called you cold call. They didn't know you before, but they read your book and they said, I think you're the person to solve my problem. Tell us about what that experience has been for you.
Well, first, it's a really good day when that happens. When somebody calls up and says, I've got your book, you're like, yay, because we love that. And then they say, gosh, that book describes exactly what's going on in my workplace. And then you go, oh gosh. And then they say, can you help us with this problem? Mm-hmm. And we love hearing that. We love, first off, that they looked at the stuff. And then the second thing is they got to know you through the book. And then the third thing is they picked up the phone because you made it easy in the book to contact them. That's huge. And they picked up the phone and said, we would like more of this. And because they got to know you through the book. So, sorry, there's a puppy. And so I know, dogs everywhere. And they helped me write as well. But the idea there is because of that, they pick up the phone, they call you now, you've got business you didn't even know you weren't looking for, you weren't marketing, you weren't prospecting. They just found you because of the book. And to that end, I encourage people also to make sure that you've got something online that aligns with the book. I think every single book needs to have its own book landing page. And on that book landing page, it's what else goes into the book, the ancillary things. For example, my Why Leaders Fail book. If you want an example, I don't think this is the greatest possible, but it's pretty good. We have a web page the book is called Why Leaders Fail and the 7 Prescriptions for Success. The web page is 7 Prescriptions for Success, the number 7. And on there is a free download chapter. Our most popular chapter is the Trust chapter. So that's a free download. We created a leadership assessment. That's there. We created a book. Like if you want to have a book club read this, we created the book club outline for this. We created a course content for this. We created all kinds of bonuses for this. The bonuses, by the way, are not a huge seller. People who want the book want the book. The bonuses are nice, but it's just a nice thing to have. So we created all of these other things in the book landing page, as well as a video where if you don't really know, or you've never seen Peter or I, or you've never seen Peter or me doing anything, that you can click on the video and get to know us a little bit. And that's really nice. So I really encourage people to have, again, some kind of online book extension of the book, and make sure you've got something online. Also, and this is the mistake I made in the Master Your World book that I did not make in the most recent one, again, because I did not have help on the Master Your World book, but I didn't put in any hyperlinks. Partly because there wasn't any real online book option at the time. That's since been fixed, but I didn't have any hyperlinks. So as people are reading on their Kindle and you reference something, they want a place to go. You got to give them a place to go. And that's something that, again, what a rookie mistake I made on that one. I mean, again, it was 10 years ago, but still, it was a rookie mistake.
Yeah, and you're raising such good points, Mary, about why we do what we do the way we do it. Because each of our authors comes away with a website that we have designed with and for them by a web designer, someone who specializes in this, not just like a hack, like I would be if I were to design a website. And we've got all of those downloadables that they're creating for each chapter. That's part of our program. Where they're creating those videos that you're talking about as part of the program. I mean, all of these things are part of the program for exactly the reason that you're saying, because they're really important. And rookies might overlook that this conversation that happens starts in chapter 1 of, and you can get this, and these are available. Yeah, they're not the selling point. Somebody's not going to buy any of our books that we publish because there are amazing freebies, but they're a great way to get into conversation with these people who are looking for this solution, the unique solution to a problem that you offer.
And here's the thing, for me to do this by myself, alone, we did, I'd never developed a landing page for a book before. And not only that, but I didn't even know anybody else who really had at the time. So I kind of stumbled through it, and it took a ton of time. Excuse me, please. Sorry, I've got a dog who's excited about a squirrel. Hey, girls. Squirrels are very exciting. And deer. We've had crops and crops and crops and herds of deer lately. So that's Abby. Abby, come here, please, baby. So sorry about that. But this whole idea of a landing page, like I say, I had to hire a website designer, get the stuff, figure out what the domain name would be, try to figure out what would be helpful, go back. I mean, just the time involved was ridiculous. And the same with the video. Getting good video is dreadfully hard. I filmed an entire day of video only to realize that part of my jacket had bunched up and it made me look fat. So of course, you can't use that. That's wrong. So then we have to redo everything, rehire the videographer, redo the hair, redo the makeup, do all of that just to get a 30-second great video that's a book promo. And it just takes a ton of time when you're doing it by yourself. And the problem is people don't realize the difference between doing it by yourself and having a professional product. And many people go cheap, and I would just advise people, if you're serious about your business, cheap is not the way to go. Because again, it's an extension of you and your brand, and that's what it's going to look like to the rest of the world is cheap.
Yes, and I mean this, if I may, Mary, coming from a fiscally conservative economist. Am I right?
I'm fiscally conservative, socially kind of liberal. I like to get good value. And as an economist, people say, oh, you're an economist. I go, and therefore, people think economists are all cheap. And if you've ever seen a crowd of them, you think, wow, based on what they look like, that would be true. And I say that with all love to my fellow economists. But the idea is, I'm very mindful of the costs involved of running a business. And you have to figure out where you're going to put your best investment dollars. And again, I say having a great book and a great product is a huge way to move your business forward. Having a bad book will actually harm your business.
Yes.
It's like that YouTube video of you that somebody took by accident, you thought was funny, a couple of years ago. And then you're going, oh gosh, that's the one with the most views. And that's what my potential, employers or that my potential clients are going to see. Oh, that's a bad idea. And you can't get rid of it.
Right.
It's a problem.
It doesn't go away. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Thank you so much for this amazing advice that you've given to our listeners and our viewers today, Mary. We've talked about this implicitly, but explicitly, based on what you know about me. We were together last week. We worked together. Why would you say that choosing me to help an entrepreneur with his or her expert book would be an awesome choice?
So that's a great question. So first, because I have met many other people who claim to sort of walk people through the book process. Many of them are churn 'em and burn 'em. They want as many authors as possible so that they can say, yes, I've worked with 150 authors or 200 authors or whatever. But I've seen the book product, I've seen the final product, and it's not something to be proud of. So there's that. And that's not something you and your team do, which I like a lot. You're more interested in the quality and making sure that the quality product at the end is something that you can be proud of as well as the author, number one. Number two, as you know, I love smart people, and you're smart. I love sort of this whole Harvard thing going on. That's pretty fantastic. Anybody who starts to talk and says, all right, so with neuroscience, I'm like, what? So that was absolutely fantastic. I loved that. I love finding people who are smarter than I am, and especially great in their field. I love, love, love working with smarter people. It makes me elevate my game. And again, for me, it gives me a better product. And third, one of the hardest things about putting a book together is finding a team that works well together. And I had just horror story number 962. I had a content editor and a grammar editor, and the grammar editor was supposed to look at things when everything was finished. And when the content editor moved something, she came back and said, well, I can't believe it. And all of a sudden, one of the editors is crying on the phone with me because she didn't like what the content editor is doing. I'm like, there's no crying in book publishing. Why are you crying? She's like, well, I just felt like my views weren't important. Oh, for Pete's sakes. I want a team that works well together. I don't want to have to manage people who are crazy and emotional and all that. No, I want you to do your job, and you've got the team already. You have everybody in place. Everybody works well together, all of that. And point number 4 is when I give you my product, my manuscript, I know that nothing's going to fall through the cracks. You've got the process, you've got the checklist, you've got all of that put together, and I don't have to worry about, oh God, what am I missing? Which frankly, when you publish a book by yourself, the whole time you just feel like there's so much I don't know. What am I missing? So for those reasons, and again, I apologize for the dog who they help me in all things.
Well, I mean, the dog had something to say too about why.
Your dog is so well behaved and sleeping behind you. So yeah, cease. Abby.
Well, Mary, thank you again so much for your super valuable tips, your expertise, for sharing all of that with us. For people who want to find out about you and your books and where they can get them, where should they go?
So my website is productiveleaders.com. productiveleaders.com, because who wants an unproductive leader? And there's a store there, and you can find a bunch of my books there. Amazon has them as well. And if people have questions and they want to ask specifically about you or your process or anything that they might have a question on, my email, it's mary@productiveleaders.com. And I personally answer all emails, and I'm happy to help any of your audience, your future authors of America, your bestsellers, all that. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time, Mary. I really appreciate you.
Have a great day. Take care.